Hi folks, welcome to the next edition of Serverless Craic with myself, Dave Anderson, author and contributor at the Serverless Age and technical fellow with Bizarre Voice.
I'm Mark McCann, architect at Globalization Partners and author and contributor at the Serverless Edge.
Michael O'Reilly, architect with Globalization Partners and contributor with Serverless Age.
You almost forgot who you were there, Mike.
I did. I had to think about that for a second. See Mark's on his holidays as well there in the background. So
Absolutely.
Very good. So we were chatting earlier in the week about two things I think are quite interesting: engineering excellence and well architected. It's two phrases we would kick about a lot, and they're heavily featured in the book, the Value Flywheel Effect, which is coming out soon. So question for you, do you think engineering excellence and well architected are well understood in the wider industry?
That's a good question.
It depends.
I think it depends. I know like the term engineering excellence is something we would use quite a lot, and it kind of does encompass like a lot of sort of, broader topics. Certainly with well architected, I think well architected has become more, it's emerging more, and people are becoming more aware of it. Certainly in the organizations we work within, because we're obviously big fans of it. But I think with the engineering excellence and the notion of putting in these enabling constraints and just thinking about your engineering performance in general, I think a lot of companies do think about it. Maybe it differs, but I'm not sure, like at an individual engineering level, how well it's understood, or how we think about it.
Yeah, I think it's still something that needs to mature in the industry. I think the Accelerate book and the work that Jez Humble and Co did with continuous delivery definitely has helped, and Dave Farley and others has really helped mature or helped bring forward a culture of seeking engineering excellence. But I don't think it's embedded across all organizations yet. We'll see it in pockets. Some might have, we have the 4 key metrics, or we focus on deployment frequency, but that's not just that, right? There's lots more to it than that, and I think it's improved. I think teams are starting to understand the value of having a fast feedback loop and baking a lot of the engineering disciplines and the guardrails into their pipelines, and getting faster feedback on quality issues. But again, I don't think it's done in a holistic manner. I don't think it's done in a joined up manner yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I think having two terms for these things is very important, and that there's a good definition for them. Maybe we could dig into the two of them one by one. So maybe start with engineering excellence. Engineering excellence is a funny one. I think when I first heard that term, I think people in the States were using it. So I know Amazon use it, right? It's Amazon. I don't know where it came up. Probably just came up in kind of folklore. But two things interesting with this for me. One is very few companies will say they don't want good engineering. Or we say, no, I don't want good engineering. We were happy with bad engineering. So no one ever says that, but they don't define what good looks like. And then the second thing is a lot of the expectation on engineers is just to write loads of code.
Yeah.
And for me, engineering excellence is not writing loads of code. You're getting into the code's reliability and thinking about, as you said, Mark, things like feedback loops and how well the engineering, function in your team is performing and how you're meeting your bigger goals. I think that's the thing that we found super interesting when we were doing a lot of this. We tied that to a business goal, and that made it very different. That made it real, as opposed to, oh, my complexity is really low, aren't I great? We just lifted it up a level.
Yeah, and I think it's also that they can start to articulate this when they're having prioritization conversations with their customers or their business partners. It's not just feature, do delivery. They're able to have a well articulated conversation about the value in investing in better testing or better pathway to production, or reducing code liabilities, or doing a well architected review, or doing a threat model. They're starting to have a language that they can explain the value of these things to people that aren't on the team. So some of the stakeholders then can start to see the benefit. If we do these things, we'll prevent problems down the line. We will help the flywheel turn faster in the shorter to medium term. Right? If we can invest in engineering excellence. So I think a lot of the work in like books like Accelerate and our own book, right, help make the case for investing in these things. So hopefully it's easier now than it has been in the past to get the buy-in, the backing for that investment in engineering excellence, right? Not just feature anymore.
No, I think that's a, and then like, just listening to you guys talk about that, it's like, when you look at the Accelerate book and obviously then the Dora metrics, and when you look at the Dora metrics, I think they're more for, they aid technical leadership in a lot of ways, like, so, your teams they'll want to be doing stuff fast and they'll want to get stuff out and they'll be keen to, solve problems or address business need or customer need, that sort of thing. But you as technical leadership, you've got to make sure it's done well. Down the line, how are we actually performing? Like, okay, so we're delivering fast, but are we delivering with quality? How many errors are coming back with each of these releases? What was the team's approach to solutioning on that? Are we moving fast enough? And I kind of feel like these sorts of things they're good for technical leaders. I would use I kind of love the saying, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Like, so how do we set ourselves up? At the beginning of things, I like to kind of go a bit slower, like looking at our process. How are we going to test this is successful in production? How do we limit the errors? What do we know? What do we not know? What do we need to do up front? And I think as a leadership, sometimes you've got to be prepared to go slow and put those things in place to then enable your teams to then operate more effectively, line. We talk about that sort of problem prevention. And again, it's kind of baked into the long-term value sort of section of the flywheel. If you're not, I always kind of have the saying, myself, it's like, you're either going to pay for it up front and do all that stuff, that discovery, and put that rigor into we always talk about pathways to production and put that rigor into that, or you're going to pay for it in the long term. You just decide what's right for yourself. And obviously we prefer to do things in the right way. So I think with engineering excellence, that's where you get a lot of the engineering maturity, a lot of the experience comes into play. You're having to control flow, you're having to sort of question how people are approaching certain things. So it's a really important topic, I think, for leadership in organizations in the industry.
And as well, really, it's the thing about enabling constraints, because what you're really doing is you're making decisions for the for the engineering teams, and you're being opinionated about certain things that they can do well. I think two things that I think when we defined engineering excellence, we used the Dan Pink stuff, the mastery, autonomy. We translate those to technical excellence, autonomy, and I think it was customer focus. I think it was. That was a nice way to phrase it and explain to people what it meant, which kept people focused. And then the Dora metrics is brilliant. So here's your quiz question: can you name the 5th Dora metric? The new one.
The 5th one. Oh,
put us on the spot there, Dave.
Well,
I just looked it up.
Name the 4: deployment frequency, lead time.
Lead time to change failure rate, and mean time to recovery.
Yeah, the 5th one you just added last year is reliability. No, when I was thinking resiliency, but it's reliability. It's the one that Google added, or the Dora thing, but it's still super relevant.
Yeah, so the reliability is, and again, that ties us.
They're getting on the SRE. That's where they put that.
But at the same time, it kind of then opens up. This is kind of why we say, like, we talk about the engineering excellence, which is really around your flow and what do we call your feedback cycles. How you think you're performing. But then at the same time, then you kind of bleed into the well-architected, and how does well-architected facilitate dimensions of that. So I do think you are starting to see these things overlap, and obviously we can get into
completely. So we talked about engineering excellence there. So then what about well-architected? Because I think well-architected is probably better defined than engineering excellence, but I find a lot of people they haven't heard that term before, well-architected, and they think you've just made it up. But it's actually quite specific what it is.
Yeah, I think well-architected, obviously it's hard to say in terms of just broader industry. I think it's starting to become, I'm starting to see lots more talks on the topic. I'm starting to see it more in the community. You know, people definitely starting to know what we mean when we're talking around it.
Mm.
I think certainly within the organizations we're in, it's in there, you know, and I think this is where a lot of the discipline comes in. You know, you really got to assess like, well, you know, what's the best way to go about something? You know, have we considered these various dimensions? Have we, you know, what are we good at? What can we improve upon? What will we like to change? And I think that those sorts of things help you keep. Really, I always kind of say it's a vehicle for continuous improvement. Like, you know, constantly just sort of evaluating where we're at and what we could do better. So I think, and people are acknowledging it as part of that, and I think that's working quite well. And I think it is starting to it's starting to take more of a grip.
Yeah, I think it's also this, and we haven't created this ourselves, right? There's a huge body of evidence and supporting material and videos and tutorials and workshops and labs and to support well architected. People can Google well architected, and whether they're talking about AWS, Azure, Google, they're going to get a fairly consistent response, right? They can self-serve, they can self-learn, they don't need to go to Mega Mark to learn about well architected, right? There's courses and certifications and all that sort of stuff that backs it up. So I think it's starting to permeate through. Certainly, maybe we're in an echo chamber, or maybe we have our own little bubble, but it's definitely resonating a lot more than it ever has. And I think teams are loving the fact that we are starting to focus on these things because they've always wanted to do them, and maybe they didn't have the capacity or the space or the language to fight for. Hey, we want to deliver a well architected solution.
Yeah. And here's the thing, because it's actually defined by a separate body. Do you remember years ago when you talk to architects and people say, well, good architecture to me is non-functional requirements and it's the abilities. And you say, what is it? Oh, it's performability, scalability, extendability. And it's just every stupid word with ability in the end. And everyone had a different list. And if you talk to somebody a month later, they'd have a different list again. So you never knew what someone was going to say. So it became a bit like folklore and black magic. The fact that it's now really well documented and understood, and you can round them off the scarps, it just makes it that much bit easier.
I think so. I think so. And then once and there's something that clicks with well architected, I think, with teams. You know, when you run your first sort of well architected with squads, you know, it's kind of interesting the sorts of reactions you get. But there's always stuff that comes out that you find that, you know, we could maybe if we had time, or we've been thinking about that, or we should definitely do this. You know, you always come up with stuff. But ultimately, like as a team that wants to move fast, do you have time to stop or pencil in a 2-week architectural review or bounce something off to someone 3 weeks down the line, you know, for you to make your decision? If you want to move fast, you've got to be able to be empowered with what does good architecture look like? You know, and if you've got these sets of set of guidance, or you've got patterns that are implemented in a well architected fashion, that really sets you up for, again, rapid delivery, moving with speed in an engineering excellent way. You know, again, it just removes. Again, it's fast flow. It's aimed at sort of facilitating you moving fast and getting things out quicker and being more competitive.
Yeah, and I think there's something about both of these approaches is that you're able to give all your stakeholders, confidence that not only are you going fast, but you're going fast in a good way, right? And you have the data and the metrics and the evidence to back it up, right? So, these teams that are rapidly delivering product value, they're delivering multiple times a day. They'll have a trail of evidence that they're going the right way because they've followed these practices, and they have the dashboards, and they have the logs, and they have the alarms and the alerts and the runbooks and the playbooks, and they have the key business KPIs all at their fingertips. So any stakeholder that wants to challenge them on what are you doing, how are you operating, what are you deploying, they almost have like information radiators that teams can look at. They give them the confidence that they know what's happening, right?
Because that's really important, because these things, like back in the day, it was like, well, Mickey's a great engineer and he says it's good, so it's good, but now there's like, I talk to loads of different C-suites and people on the board, and when you say well architected and engineering excellence, they go, we want that. We say, what is that? And you can rattle it off with a few points, and then you can point to something that you can actually see. like the
Yep.
dashboard. That's hugely powerful for convincing people that this stuff's important.
The other thing as well is like, I think there's also another dimension to this too. I think sometimes it's goes well unsaid a lot of the time, but when we talk about it, it's like I've experienced squads that work with well architected and they're bought in and they work through all these processes, and work with squads that aren't. When you compare the two, they're very different. But I think at an organizational level, as you said, these are a set of commoditized standards. So if you're looking to have an organization where teams can move from one area to another and move from engagement to engagement, and sort of expect a certain level of proficiency or quality or engineering excellence or well architected, these sorts of things they're sort of they facilitate that. If you have to arrive in an area that isn't well architected, and then you've got 3 months of kind of understanding what went before, or trying to understand a lot of the decision making, or you've got 12 months of technical debt that really should have been taken on board before you even moved into there. That's very difficult from a person perspective. These sorts of things definitely enable more fluidity and around, I can move one team to a different workload and they'll be able to be very effective very, very quickly, as opposed to moving them into an area that they then have to go and absorb all this cognitive burden.
The famous mobility statement. And one of the things, from a company perspective, there's a whole bunch of advantages of doing these. One is there's like a problem prevention culture, which is an interesting concept.
Yeah.
It's awesome
do you think this, I wouldn't say it exists in many companies, do you think this is well understood with a lot of companies, that a problem prevention culture is actually what you're after for your engineering area or your product area?
I think Mark should take that one. He's my problem.
I don't think it's in a lot of organizations. I don't think it's really cut through. Again, they're still on the feature factory sort of mindset. Deliver, feature, and then they had a tipping point, and then everything grinds to a halt for months or maybe years, or they never recover. But if you have a continuous improvement mindset, if you're investing in problem prevention, if you're investing in well architected engineering excellence, continuous learning, to enabling and empowering your teams, you're constantly getting ahead of those problems before they become problems. And you're investing in performance, security, resilience, high availability every day, every week, and those things just they compound on each other, right? And it's like compound interest. You're just you're getting better and better and better returns from it as you go, right? So I think that problem prevention culture is critical. But one of the big challenges with that is that silent excellence can go unrecognized or unrewarded. So you need to be careful that you have enough people who understand what good looks like, and reward it and recognize it appropriately, so that you don't fall into the superhero coming into the save the day mindset, where actually, if you had it invested in a problem prevention culture, there's no need for superheroes to come in and save the day, right?
I love the superhero. Was Mickey stayed up all Friday night. He's a legend. Well, you should have put more prep on the design review on Monday, and you wouldn't have had to do that.
Yeah. No, I think there was a point there I was kind of going away in on, but it's exactly that. It's like, so from a problem prevention perspective, do you want to spend all your time babysitting a kind of unwell architected kind of workload and dealing with all that goes on? Maybe you do, but again, we always talk about this concept of inertia and team standstill. That's really where you want your teams is moving. So as you're adding all this value, you're moving on to the next thing, and if your stuff is built with lack of quality, or it's always down, or you're having to constantly upgrade, this is where we talk about this is why serverless is such a big concept. Well architected engineering excellence, we can build these things and they're going to run, and they actually increase in value, and there's less work in them over the long term, while your teams are moving on to what you need to do as a business and as a
it's very important.
Super. I don't think a lot of orgs do think in that way, and I think by the time they do think in that way, they're already in a lot of problems.
And the good companies will bake this in from the start.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot, about creating that space for innovation. If you have a problem prevention culture, you're removing a lot of the sort of the busy work, so that your teams are truly able to focus on things that are going to innovate and help your business succeed, right? Because they're not doing disaster. They're not fixing disasters. They're not doing outages and constantly chasing their tail, trying to keep things alive, right?
Yeah, and that's quite hard to explain to senior people. It's like if you want more innovation, you need to do more boring architecture. And they're like,
Yep.
what? No, I don't need boring architecture. You need to do innovation. It's like, no, one feeds the other.
Yeah. Do you want all your best people firefighting, or do you want them helping you grow in the marketplace?
Or have your best people do architecture so everybody can innovate. Very good. So that's the crack. That'll do us for now, I think. So have we look at the Twitter at the Serverless Edge, and then at the serverlessedge.com, our blog and stuff. And we look on YouTube as well. Thanks very much.
Cheers,
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.